Some stories begin with love. Some begin with war. This one begins with a broken teacup and a man who had forgotten how to be human. Listen carefully, because this is the kind of story that holds a mirror up to your face and dares you to keep looking. His name was Shin Hyun-woo, 40 years old, the kind of rich that most people only read about in magazines. He had built his technology empire from nothing, starting with one small software company in Incheon and growing it into a global corporation worth billions. Business journalists called him a genius. His employees called him something else entirely, but only when they were sure no one was listening. He lived alone in a massive penthouse apartment in Gangnam, Seoul's most expensive district, 42 floors up, above the noise and the ordinary lives of ordinary people, behind floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city like eyes that never blinked. The apartment had 11 rooms. Shin Hyun-woo used 3 of them. He had no wife, no children. He had had a fiancée once, for years ago, a woman he had loved with the one soft part of himself he had never shown the world. She had left him, saying he was married to his company and had no room left over for a real person. He had not argued. He had simply gone back to work. After that, the last remaining softness in him closed like a door. He was not a cruel man by nature, but pain, when it has nowhere to go, sometimes turns into coldness. And coldness, when it goes on long enough, starts to look like cruelty from the outside. His household staff knew this. They worked around his moods the way farmers work around difficult weather. They showed up. They did their jobs. They stayed invisible. That was the only way to survive in the Shin household. Her name was Zara Owusu, 28 years old, Nigerian mother, Ghanaian father, raised between Lagos and Accra in a home that was rich in love and completely empty of money. She had arrived in Seoul 14 months before this story begins, on a 6-month work visa that she had quietly extended through channels that required paperwork, patience, and a great deal of prayer. She had taken the job at Shin Hyun-woo's penthouse through a domestic staffing agency. The agency had warned her about him. He is demanding, the woman at the front desk had said, choosing her words carefully. He has very high standards. The last 3 maids lasted less than 2 months each. Zara had looked at the salary figure on the contract. She thought about her mother's hospital bills in Lagos. She signed the contract. She was small in frame, but not in presence. She had eyes that noticed everything and a habit of humming softly to herself when she worked, old Ghanaian highlife songs her grandmother had taught her, melodies that turned cleaning into something almost peaceful. She worked quickly and thoroughly. She did not complain. She did not ask unnecessary questions. She kept to herself and did her job with a quiet dignity that unsettled the other staff slightly, because it was the kind of dignity that doesn't bend, even under pressure. For 11 months, she and Shin Hyun-woo existed in the same space without truly meeting. He barked instructions. She followed them. He criticized. She adjusted. He never said thank you. She never expected it. This was the arrangement. Until the morning of the teacup. It was a Tuesday, early. Shin Hyun-woo had been awake since 3 in the morning dealing with a crisis in his Singapore office. A critical software contract worth $200 million was collapsing. He had been on calls for 5 hours straight, and by 7 in the morning, he was running on 0 sleep, maximum stress, and the kind of anger that looks for somewhere to land. Zara arrived at 7:15 for her shift. She began in the kitchen, as always, cleaning and preparing the space before the cook arrived. On the counter, she found a teacup that had been left from the night before, the expensive kind, thin white porcelain with a blue painted rim. She picked it up to wash it. It slipped. The sound it made hitting the marble floor was very small. But in that silent apartment, 42 floors above the city, it was loud enough. Shin Hyun-woo was in the kitchen doorway before Zara had even fully processed what had happened. His eyes went to the pieces on the floor, then to her face. That was a Song Dynasty replica, he said. His voice was terrifyingly controlled. Hand-painted. It was the only one of its kind in my collection. It cannot be replaced. I'm very sorry, Zara said immediately. It slipped. I will pay for. You cannot pay for it, he said, cutting her off sharply. You could work for 10 years and not pay for what that was worth. He stepped into the kitchen, looking at the broken pieces, and something in him seemed to simply snap. 11 months, of unspoken frustration, 5 hours of impossible phone calls, for years of a closed door where his heart used to be. All of it came out at once. "You people," he said, and those two words carried a weight that hit Zara like a physical thing. "You come in here, you touch things that don't belong to you, you break what cannot be fixed, and then you say sorry like sorry means anything." Zara stood very still. "I want you out of this apartment," Shin Hyunwoo said. "Today. Now. Call the agency and tell them you're done. I will pay what I owe you for the month, but I don't want to see your face in this building again." Zara looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in her eyes that was not tears. It was something older and quieter than tears. She bent down slowly, picked up every piece of the broken cup from the floor, placed them carefully on the counter, removed her apron, folded it neatly, and set it beside the pieces. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She picked up her bag from the staff room and walked to the front door. At the door, she stopped. Without turning around, she said in a voice that was completely steady, "I hope you find what it is you're actually angry about, because it was never the cup." Then she left. The door closed softly behind her. Shin Hyun-woo stood alone in his kitchen with the broken pieces of the teacup and a silence that felt heavier than it should have for a Tuesday morning. He told himself he felt nothing. He hired a replacement through the agency within 24 hours. A quiet Korean woman in her 50s who moved through the apartment efficiently and never hummed. The apartment was clean. Everything was in order. There were no broken cups. Everything was exactly as he preferred it. So why couldn't he sleep? On the second day, his assistant, a sharp young man named Lee Juno, who had worked with him for 6 years and was one of the only people on earth Shin Hyun-woo actually listened to, placed a coffee on his desk and said carefully, "The agency called. They said the maid is requesting the rest of her month's pay." "Send it," Shin said, not looking up. "Already done." Juno paused. "She also left something at the front desk downstairs. Said it belonged to you." Shin looked up. "What is it?" Juno placed a small envelope on the desk. Inside was a piece of paper. On it was written, in careful handwriting, a list of 23 items, everything that had needed maintenance or replacing in the apartment in the past 11 months. The slow leaking pipe under the bathroom sink, the loose hinge on the balcony door, the light fitting in the storage room that flickered, along with the exact cost of repairs for each, cheaper alternatives where possible, and the contact details of reliable contractors. At the bottom of the list, she had written, "I noticed these things and didn't want to leave without telling someone. The apartment is beautiful. It deserves to be taken care of." Shin Hyun-woo read the list twice. Then he put it down and stared at the window for a very long time. On the third day, his assistant Juno came into his office with an expression that was carefully neutral in the way that meant something significant was being kept under control. "Sir," Juno said, "I need to show you something." He placed a printed document on the desk. Juno had run a routine background check on all departing staff. It was standard procedure. He had not expected to find anything remarkable. What he found was not routine. Zara Owusu held 2 degrees. The first was a Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering from the University of Lagos, where she had graduated first in her class of 400 students. The second was a master's degree in Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning from Imperial College London, completed on a full academic scholarship, with a dissertation that had been published in 2 international journals and cited by researchers across 3 continents. Before coming to Seoul, she had worked for 2 years as a junior AI researcher at a technology firm in London. She had left that position abruptly 18 months ago, exactly when her mother was diagnosed with a late-stage illness requiring treatment that the family could not afford. She had liquidated her savings, taken every high-paying job available, including this one, and had been sending the majority of her earnings home every single month. The research she had published, Juno explained, his voice very quiet, was in the exact field that Shin Hyun-woo's company had been struggling with for 3 years. The problem at the core of the Singapore contract crisis, the one that had kept him awake all night before the morning of the teacup, was precisely the kind of problem her dissertation had proposed a solution for. Shin Hyun-woo did not move for a very long time. Then he said, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from somewhere much deeper than his throat, "She was mopping my floors. Yes, Juno said. For 11 months. Yes, sir. And I called her, he stopped. He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead and closed his eyes. He thought about you people. He thought about the way she had picked up every piece of the broken cup with her bare hands. He thought about the note. The apartment is beautiful. It deserves to be taken care of. He thought about a woman who had one of the sharpest minds in her field, scrubbing bathroom tiles in silence, humming songs to herself, and not once, asking to be seen as anything more than what the contract said she was. The door that had been closed in him for 4 years cracked open just slightly. What came through was shame, clean and absolute. He called the agency. They gave him her number after some convincing and a number that reflected his impatience. He sat with the phone in his hand for 4 minutes before he pressed call. It rang 3 times. Hello. Her voice was exactly as he remembered it. Calm, unhurried. This is Shin Hyun-woo, he said. A pause. I know who this is, she said. He had prepared what he wanted to say. He had written notes, which he had never done for a personal conversation in his life. But all of it left him the moment he heard her voice. I read your research, he said instead. Silence. The paper on adaptive neural architecture in predictive systems, he continued. The one published in the AI journal in 2021. I read it this morning. Okay, she said carefully. It's remarkable, he said, and his voice on that word did something it almost never did. It was honest, not polished, not controlled, just honest. It's the most elegant solution to a problem I've been trying to solve for 3 years. Another pause, longer this time. Why are you calling me? She asked. Because I owe you an apology, he said. A real one, not a formal one. She said nothing. He took that as permission to continue. What I said to you, he started. The words I used. The way he stopped. Started again. I was in pain that morning, and I handed it to you because you were there and because I had already decided without knowing anything about you what kind of person you were. And I was wrong. I was completely wrong. And I'm sorry. The line was quiet for so long he thought she had hung up. Then she said, softly, my mother passed away last week. The words landed in the center of his chest. I'm sorry, he said, and this time the word carried everything he had never put into it before. I'm so deeply sorry. She held on for 14 months, Zara said quietly. Long enough for me to pay for everything she needed. So I don't regret any of it. Not even the teacup. A pause. A small sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh or the end of a cry. I always thought that cup was too delicate for a kitchen counter anyway. He asked her to meet him. She came to his office building, not the penthouse, on a Wednesday afternoon, dressed simply in a yellow wrap dress with her natural hair pulled back. She walked into the lobby of a 40-story tower with her head level and her eyes straight ahead. And 3 different people stopped what they were doing just to look at her, not because she was in the lobby of a building where she used to mop floors, but because she moved like someone who had already survived the hardest part and knew it. Shin Hyun-woo met her in a conference room, not his private office. He had thought about that choice carefully. The conference room was neutral ground. It said, I'm not the man in the penthouse right now. I'm just a person asking to be heard. He had the Singapore files spread on the table. He said, I'm not asking you to forgive me yet. I understand that takes time, but I need to ask you something first. Zara sat across from him. Ask, would you look at this problem? He slid the files toward her. Not as an employee, as a peer, as someone whose work I should have known about long before today. Tell me if the solution you proposed in your 2021 paper can be applied here. Tell me honestly. I can take it. She looked at the files. Then she looked at him. She said, You fired me over a cup. Yes, he said, without flinching. You said you people. He held her gaze. Yes, I did. And there is no version of that sentence that was acceptable, and I will not pretend there is. Zara studied his face. She had spent 11 months in the same space as this man, watching him from the edges of rooms. She had seen every version of him. The rage, the exhaustion, the way he sometimes stood at the window at night when he thought no one could see him, just looking out at the city with an expression that was not powerful at all. It was the expression of someone profoundly alone. She pulled the files toward her. She read for 9 minutes without speaking. Then she took a pen from the middle of the table and began to write. She solved the core problem in 40 minutes. Not all of it, But the piece that had been blocking everything else, the adaptive sequencing error that had made the whole system unstable, she identified it, explained it, and sketched a framework for its repair in clear, precise language that made his three-person engineering team, who had been working on it for months, go very quiet. One of them said, almost to himself, "That's it. That's actually it." Shin Hyun-woo sat at the end of the table and watched the room react to her mind. He watched his engineers lean forward. He watched the problem that had cost him sleep and contracts and 3 years of frustration begin to dissolve under 40 minutes of her attention. He thought about 11 months of her humming in his kitchen. He thought about the flowers she had apparently placed in his corridor, which he later learned from the building service log she had bought herself from the market downstairs every week. Small bright things that she had arranged near the service entrance because she had told Mrs. Lee, the housekeeper, once she needed to see something beautiful every morning to start the day right. He looked at Zara Owusu across the conference table, pen in hand, explaining something to his engineers in a voice that was patient and precise and completely without ego, and he felt something shift in him so completely that he had to look away for a moment to collect himself. After the meeting, in the corridor outside, he said to her, "I'd like to offer you a position. Senior research consultant. Whatever terms you need." She considered him. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's fair," he said. She started to walk toward the elevator. Then she stopped. She turned back. "You asked me to forgive you," she said. "Earlier you said you weren't asking yet. But you were." She tilted her head slightly. "I forgive you. Not for your sake. For mine. Because I refuse to carry what belongs to you." She paused. "But if we're going to work together, you should know one thing about me." "What's that?" he said. "I hum when I work," she said. "I'm not going to stop." He looked at her for a long moment. And Shin Hyun-woo, who had not smiled, genuinely and without calculation, in longer than he could remember, smiled. "I know," he said quietly. "I never wanted you to." She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. He stood alone in the corridor of his own building, 42 floors below the penthouse where she used to mop his floors, and for the first time in 4 years, the closed door inside him wasn't just cracked open. It was wide open, and something warm was coming through.
If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, comment and subscribe for more stories.